Okay. On to the home stretch. That's what we are. So the last weeks of our term, what I want to do is change my mind a little bit, because what I was planning on doing I realized wasn't realistic. So narrowed my focus, or our focus. And so the rest of this term we're going to do is we're going to look at one particular part of the dispute between Nozick and Rawls, or more generally between those who hold sort of views that Nozick has and people who want to challenge them. And the particular point I want to look at is to do with a standard way of arguing or reasoning that people like Nozick give in support of that sort of jarring phrase that taxation is like forced labor. And so what it comes to is what Nozick is picking up on, right? When he's saying taxation is like forced labor, is he thinks you cannot make a neat separation between the individual and their work, right? So he wants to say, well, when you just take my money, it's not just my money that you're taking part of me too, because, well, I made that money, right? That's sort of that's the intuition. And of course, on the one hand, we can all see the intuition, but on the other hand, we already saw when we looked at that phrase that if you start poking at it, it's a slippery thing, right? Like, it's not quite clear, easy to pin down, and the ways that you might want to pin it down, they seem to be quite quickly problematic. So that's the thing that I want to look at. And the first version of this has to do with a particular debate between Rawls and Nozick on natural talents and desert. So if you've read it, you'll see that Rawls has some very critical things to say about people who think that you deserve your talents, or that you should be paid on the basis of what you deserve in a just economy or in a just society. Really, Rawls thinks that ultimately desert or deservingness is not really a fundamental concept at all. Right? He does think it exists, but it's only something that happens sort of downstream. You first come up with your theory of justice, and then once we've set up the rules of justice within that overall structure, within a just society, you can be deserving by playing by the rules or something like that. It's not quite clear how he thinks that would work, but I'm going to maybe get back to that if we have enough time. But so he thinks, you can be deserving more or less like when you play a game, right? So when you play a game, you can deserve to score a goal, say, by, I don't know what, playing it in an attacking fashion, or having a positive approach to the game, or not being foul play or whatever, right? There's all sorts of ways you might say, well, you deserve to score a goal, even though you didn't. But Rawls says that only is true once we've set up sort of a fair structure, a fair framework for the game to be played in. It's not that without those rules, there's just one side that is more deserving than the other, and so that one should win or something. And so too in society, he thinks. In society, we don't just have deservingness per se, we have deservingness only within the overall basic structure of justice, which ought to be like Rawls says. And that's the thing that Nozick doesn't like.
It's almost like Rawls is setting the terms of the contract. If you want to participate in society, we're not going to stop you like by some strict leveling mechanism, but you are allowed to go out and make your $3 million or $3 billion. It's just that, just understand that part of that is going to be given to the least well-off. It's almost like setting a contract in Rawls' mind, I would think.
Yes, right. So he thinks, he draws explicitly an analogy between his theory and the social contract tradition, right? And so the thought is, if you're a person who makes $3 million a year and you're going to get taxed at, whatever, 48% or something, right? Do you have grounds for objecting to that? Rawls says no, because there are rules that are like the rules of a contract. It's not an actual contract, you didn't actually sign it, but the original position shows you that it's very much like what you like signing a contract, because you can reasonably endorse these terms. If you think of yourself in an impartial way, you could see, actually, these are the types of rules that I would want to live under if I make 3 million or 3,000. Right? And if that's okay, then you would voluntarily, it's as voluntary as you can expect it to be, if you remember that, right? He says, no society could ever be truly voluntary, but this gets you as close as we could expect. And so it's not an actual contract, but it's as good as a contract. This stuff about deservingness and so on, Rawls takes that on because it's a threat to that view, right? Because that view it gets going only when the terms under which we live in society, the tax rate, the property system, the political system, all the laws and the benefits and burdens, if that whole system gets decided from within the original position. Right? And you remember, in the original position, we abstract who we are, but we also we throw out any sort of moral theories or claims, right? Because the original position is supposed to settle or build up the moral claims, moral principles. So it's sort of like you wipe the slate clean, right? You don't know whether you're strong, you don't know whether you're weak, you don't know whether you're tall, you don't know whether you're short, male, female, color, religion, ethnicity, all these things go out. And whatever you think might sort of in our world attach to being a type of person like that. Right? So if you're rich in our world, you might think, well, that entitles me to having a good chunk of money because I'm rich, right? That's my stuff, and if they tax it for me, then they're taking it. They better have a good reason. In the original position, you don't get to think that way. Because in the original position, you assume that stuff isn't there. We're trying to decide what those rules should be. And so the stuff about natural talent and desert is a threat, because if we can say that there really is a fundamental claim that we have over ourselves as a person, and that claim extends into the stuff that we have, right, then taxation really becomes like forced labor, original position or not. Right? So that's why Rawls wants to go after this. All right. So far, so good? Terry, am I misrepresenting this? Or no? No? Okay. I thought you had a... Not yet. Right, exactly. Well, let me begin. So, yeah. So Rawls discusses something that he calls the system of natural liberty. That's a phrase from Adam Smith. Adam Smith says that sort of a free market economy is what he calls a system of natural liberty. The naturalness, of course, would rub someone like Rawls the wrong way, right? Smith is sort of suggesting that this is sort of the moral default. If we get rid of all the tradition, the history, coercion, politics, and so on, we strip away all the things that sort of people have created, really what we have left naturally is the free market. That's sort of that's the fallback option when we strip all the fluff, right? Of course, that's exactly what Rawls wants to say. No. If we're stripping, we strip all the way to the original position, right? And so he doesn't want to have the system of natural liberty. That's one of the options that he says you might think this is an option we should consider in the original position, but really we don't. He says it's not even a candidate. Right? So there's several candidates of what good theories of justice look like. And this one isn't one, actually, for the reason that Nozick goes after him, because this doesn't have a distributive condition in it. Right? System of natural liberty is roughly Nozick's theory of the entitlement theory. Just it's a process theory. People acquire, and then they transfer. And that's more or less it. So Rawls doesn't want that. That's one part of the critique. He says, well, it doesn't have a distributive condition because people could turn off really, really poorly off, and nobody would accept that behind the veil of ignorance. But then there is the more general critique, which is that what the distributions are affected by in the system of natural liberty. And that's where the talent and deservingness stuff comes in. So, all right. Here's a premise. This is one we'll look at a couple times. This is the one that Nozick really goes after. It's what Nozick calls the positive argument. So if a person, P, doesn't deserve a certain feature, call it F, right? Then F, that feature, should not determine P's position in society. That's a premise that lies at the heart of Rawls's argument. Here are two quotes where you can see that. Right? Rawls says, justice should mitigate the influence of social contingencies and natural fortune on distributive shares. So social contingencies, where you're born, right? Or social contingencies being, we tend to be more impressed by tall people than by short people. Right? That seems to be true, right? Because they get higher salaries for jobs for which, sorry. Somehow it always, I don't know how this reflects upon me, but somehow when I was nervous for job interviews, I always found solace in that. I did. I used to think to myself, well, I'm up one little bit, because at least I'm tall. So yeah, help calm me down. So next time you have a job interview, really freak out. It's my or find some other bullshit story that you can tell yourself. You know. All right, so that's one, right? He says mitigate. We want to get rid of these, right? So some things that are just social factoids, or just like freaks of how society has developed, that affect how we do. People get paid more if they're tall. Doesn't really seem to be relevant in any particular way to the job that they do. So you want to mitigate that, he says, to undo that. And then natural fortune, of course, well, that being tall in some sense is natural fortune, although the fact that would get you paid more is the social contingency. But there are other natural fortunes, which is some people are just able to do certain jobs that others aren't. Right? Physically, that's true, of course, of athletes and so on, but also mentally, right? Not everyone is able to do jobs that require a high IQ, for example. Not just that. Yes, not everyone is able to do jobs that require a lot of empathy, for example. My sister is a physician. She's very good at the empathetic part of it, and I can tell you I could not do that. So, like most philosophers, like on the border of Asperger's or something like that. Anyway, so here's what Rawls says. We must nullify the effects of these contingencies, right, which put men at odds and tempt them to exploit social and natural circumstances to their own advantage. So nullify, got to get rid of that, right? So if we're trying to get rid of it, the idea is there are some features here that should not determine, right? It should be the determining power of those should be undone. This doesn't talk about the deserving yet, but that's the context, right? All right. The system of natural liberty, that's the Nozick, Adam Smith, free market type world. More Nozick than Smith maybe, but whatever. So allows people's initial talents, so just the stuff that with which you're born, your height, your smarts, your empathy, etc., etc. There's a lot. That list is a lot longer, right? To determine their social position, their income, etc. In the free market, all sorts of stuff is going to get rewarded that you were just born with, or just happens to be valued, and whatever. Right? But, however, here's the quote again, it's one of the fixed points in our moral judgments. It's an unmovable part of our thinking about morality things. No one deserves his place in the distribution. So here we get the deserving part, right? In the distribution of natural talents, any more than he deserves his initial starting place in society. So you remember, right, he says, look, you don't deserve your starting place in society. That's a reason for putting that stuff behind the veil of ignorance. And that seems to be the same, by parity of reasoning, the same is true of the talents. And so we put that stuff behind the veil of ignorance too. So your talents don't give you any claim on reward, pay, standing, status, whatever, right? Hence the nullifying, right? And so the initial endowment of natural assets and the contingencies of their growth and nurture in early life are arbitrary from a moral point of view. And that just seems to be, for Rawls, if something is arbitrary from a moral point of view, then we must nullify it. Right? It seems morality must then try and undo it. Notice that this is one of the things that Nozick tries to go after, right? He says, even if it is arbitrary in the sense of random, right? That doesn't necessarily entail that you should be undoing it, right? It just means it's random. So you need something more, Nozick thinks, to undo it. Hence he makes the distinction between the negative and the positive argument. The positive argument being, yeah, here's a reason why you should undo it, and the negative ones being just arguments against people who think that something that is arbitrary should determine the outcome. All right. So, therefore, to finish it up, right? Intuitively, the most obvious injustice of the system of natural liberty, just like Nozick's free market system, is that it permits distributive shares to be improperly, it's kind of cooking the books, but improperly influenced by these factors so arbitrary from a moral point of view.
There's one commentator, at least, who attributes to Rawls the view that the fact that the distribution of natural talents is unjust, whereas this is clearly it's neither just or unjust. It's what you do with them that's just or unjust.
Who is this commentator?
Fukuyama.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'll show you the book.
Right. weird. I don't even
Yeah,
know
I mean,
what that.
I don't assume anyone had that misunderstanding, but
Right.
the fact that one person's more intelligent than another is neither just nor unjust.
Right.
The fact that some
So Fukuyama thinks that's unjust?
he attributes to Rawls.
Oh, okay. Right. Yeah, I don't think that's.
Rawls thinks it's unjust.
Yeah, I don't think that. Yeah, that seems a plain misreading, right?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's actually Schmidt has a little book, Elements of Justice, where he tries to make some hay out of the sense of that there's two senses of arbitrary, where arbitrary could mean random, was like if you play a game of cards and you get two aces or something like that. It's arbitrary that you got the two aces and not me, and that's a sense that seems to be just sort of neither just nor unjust. But then there's arbitrary in the sense of capricious, right? Where you think like sort of like in feudalism, the king has arbitrary power, which sort of means like sort of there's the possibility of abuse, which itself is an injustice, and that stronger sense of arbitrary would give you a good reason to accept this. But Schmidt thinks that just randomness. Right? So if the deck is stacked and therefore you get the two aces, that would be arbitrary in the capricious sense. If it's just randomly shuffling and you just end up with two aces, and he thinks nature is arbitrary random, but not arbitrary capricious. And so takes the wind out of the sails, is then he thinks. Cameron? Okay.
And I think Rawls would say something to the effect of there's neither, going off of what he said, there's neither injustice or justice in the way things are distributed naturally. It's just a matter of how institutions choose to react to the fact of these distributions.
Exactly, yeah, and that's a very Rawlsian thing to say, right? So for Rawls, justice and sort of social justice, the way we build our society and our institutions, really is all the way a matter of like how do we choose to react to the environment and the circumstances we're in a way that's fair, right? And so then the idea is, well, the circumstances are just there. That's just how nature's cards are dealt, if you keep the metaphor going. And that's just a random thing, and so how to respond to it? Well, if we're going to make our response to it fair, then we won't let that randomness affect how we distribute the benefits and burdens in society. That's one of the more powerful ways I think you can put the intuition.
So, two questions. So the first one, just to be clear, so Rawls does not like the idea of the system of natural law.
Correct. Yes, he's against it. Yeah.
So the second question, an example of this, like in the quote where it says, the system of natural liberty allows people's initial talents to determine their social position, their income. Could that be compared to like the discrimination of like color and race in the workplace? Like how you often see that people with we're talking about this in my previous class, so I'm asking, like people with a name that doesn't sound like American or white are less likely to get a job rather than someone who is like has a more white American sounding name. So would that be a initial talent? And Rawls would say like that should not determine a person's social position.
Yeah, so I don't think you would call it a talent necessarily, but right. But you're right that it's the same problem, right? So that's a social contingency. That's just sort of a brute environmental factor, and it's unfair, right? So it militates against certain groups in ways it doesn't against others. That gives advantages to those others that it doesn't give to the some. And that's an injustice, right? And if you feel the pull of that, or want to undo that, then you feel at least the beginning of the pull of this argument, right? Yeah.
What would Nozick say?
Well, we'll get to that, but it's a good question. You mean like what would Nozick say about what look like discriminatory cases? Well, Nozick gets off the boat at the very first step, right? So he thinks, no, the fact that you don't deserve it is not a reason for nullifying the effects. You need something more. I think what Nozick would say is that this kind of stuff in the system of natural liberty, will take care of itself. So it might take a little while, but these people will find jobs at some point because they have a lot to offer. And if they have a lot to offer, then there will be employers who think, wait a minute, there's all these people with the name Mohammed that are, whose price in the labor market is low, but their productivity is high, so I ought to be hiring these people. And so he thinks that he might, I mean, I'm speculating, he might think that this will correct itself. That's at least the way that people like Milton Friedman, for example, used to talk about this, right? They said the free market is actually, it puts a lot of pressure on racists because racism is expensive. Because you're not hiring your most productive workers because they have the wrong last name, right? And so after a while, they're going to weed these people out, is the thought. Yeah. Right. So there's some people like Friedman then will point out to saying that things like that historically most of these sort of racist cases where people had, like, black people couldn't be eaten at the counter and so on, were either law or local ordinances that put them in place. So usually they were people from the KKK or whatever forcing local business owners to behave that way. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but that's the claim that they often make. And the idea is you had to force them because if they weren't forced, then after a while they would know, like Woolworths, right downtown, right, would know that actually we're losing a lot of money by not having these black people eat inside because, you know, it's a bunch of, like, half of our potential customers are being sent out of the door, and so why would we do that? So then the idea is the profit motive puts a penalty on this type of behavior. But you might not think that that's good enough. Right.
So, like, in the first bullet point, could you insert, like, the word poverty for F? So it's like, if a person doesn't deserve poverty, then poverty should not determine that person's position in society.
I think I see where you're going. The worry I'm having is that poverty itself might be the position in society. So then we're getting circular, right? Like your poverty shouldn't determine your poverty. That doesn't seem like an interesting statement. You might say something like your parents' poverty shouldn't determine your own income or position in society. So, and if that's true, then yes, that's a very Rawlsian thing to say. Right? So, to the extent that in a society we can predict how well you do by looking at how well your parents do, a society is not living up to what Rawls wants it to be. Right. Karen,
I would say that Rawls would not even regard a distribution scheme as something dealing with moral reserve. I think he made the distinction between whether or not it's a false distinction is of course very hotly debated topic. But he made the distinction between entitlements to legitimate expectations versus moral reserve.
Yes.
And I think an example that's oftentimes used is if one wins the lottery, you're definitely entitled to the winnings of the lottery. Like, let's say you win $3 million from the lottery, which is a really good lottery, and you can pick up the money, but it's a game of luck. So there's no moral reason for why you deserve to win in the first place. It's just something that just happened.
Right, yes. And so that's another version of, another way of putting what I was trying to explain in the beginning, where Rawls wants to say, you can deserve the winnings, or you can deserve to win or get stuff in society once we set up the rules, right? And then you play the lottery game, and then, well, if your number hits, then you deserve the prize more than I do, because I didn't play or something. Right. Well, yeah, but you can't complain then that now they're taxing away that which you deserve, because the deservingness presupposes the rules, which includes the rules of taxation. So you only deserve that which is subject to taxation to begin with. Yeah, back in the original position, you would see that these are good terms for you too. So you can complain, but when you're complaining, you're kind of being inconsistent, right? You're saying, well, when I was being impartial, I see this as a good rule, but now that I know who I am, I don't like it anymore because I got to pay, right? We say, well, okay, I'm not so worried. Now, the thing that Nozick wants to go against, right, is saying, no, if you think that desert matters, as Nozick does, then it actually matters just per se. It's not something we can ignore from the original position, right? It's not something that just appears once we've set up the rules.
He's basically saying we shouldn't have even poo-pooed the natural liberty thing from the original position. We should have
Right. Well, and he thinks obviously that the original position is a problem because from the original position, the system of natural liberty is not one of the options because it doesn't care about distributions, right? So he thinks so you can see this sort of you start pulling the thread and now more and more is coming undone, right? Because, so so deserving and earning or entitlement doesn't just apply within the system. It's something that seems fundamental to Nozick. Well, if it's fundamental, then maybe the system of natural liberty is at least a contender for a theory. Justice would be among the options that we could choose when we're choosing theories of justice, which is the original position, right? But it can't, and so now, like, you see, if we allow this in, then quite a lot of trouble is coming up down the road. For the record, by the way, later in life, Nozick wrote some things that all of his many enemies jumped all over, but there was an essay where he seems to take back some of the stuff you were talking about, Michaela, where he's talking about, it's in the book The Examined Life, there's an essay where he says that there are certain things that a society can stand for or can symbolize, and that out of a care for what it stands for or what it symbolizes, you might want to put restrictions on things that otherwise wouldn't seem to be violating of rights. And so, as he writes it, it seems to open the door to a lot of stuff that he's ruling out in Anarchy, State, and Utopia. Even later, he gave an interview. He said, "No, that's not. He was just thinking about slavery, because if you take Anarchy, State, and Utopia literally, voluntary slavery is fine. Right? Like, look, it's a capitalist act between consenting adults. If I sell myself to you, right, for a certain price, so." Slavery historically was wrong, not because it was slavery, but because it was forced slavery. It's the forced part that Nozick objects to. Right? He says, well, if it's voluntary, like almost nobody will do it, but if somebody has reasons to do it, maybe that's the only way they can get money to pay for their child's surgery or something, right? Whatever, there might be their reason. Then you let it go, he thinks, because it's a voluntary choice by an adult. They get to choose to live the life that they want. And that's something later in life he said, no, like it's weird if you have a society that is supposed to be a free society. It's weird that a free society would be enforcing slavery contracts. It's sort of, that doesn't seem to be what that type of world would stand for or something, right? So that seemed to be what he was trying to take. But anyway, he was rolling some of that back. Because if you allow no slavery contracts, then you can see that you won't have to work quite as hard anymore to get to the same worries that you were raising, right? Where people with different cultural backgrounds or religious backgrounds might be discriminated against in ways that the market doesn't rule out. You might want to do some, if you want to do something about slavery, then why? By the same reasoning. Anyway. So that's a flux. But we're doing the thing for the class that's easy, which is we just pretend that never happened. We just look at the clearer opposition of the arguments anyway. Here's one question, by the way. What do you think here? So, the most obvious injustice. Do you agree with that? Or not? Serious question. I find it always a little jarring as a raised an eyebrow. I mean, like the most. Yeah.
I would have, if I was writing here, I would have put, instead of the most, I would put an, if I wanted to take a Rawlsian position because
an obvious injustice.
Yes. Or an example of an obvious injustice. Obvious is a word that puts yourself in a position to get picked apart.
Yeah.
But it's
fair enough.
But it's one of those things where if you put when you put the most obvious, even people who might be sympathetic to your line of argument might still disagree. So he could have put like an example of an injustice. Blah blah blah.
Yeah, you write a serious, you get all the money out of it, but without any of the risk of people saying it's not the most up. Yeah.
Right.
Done?
Yeah, my question was going to be just how changing that benediction still excuses the term obvious, because I mean you could have somebody else who doesn't think it's obvious at all that's an injustice, and that's the thing that I think.
Yeah.
I don't think it's the most is what's like troublesome about that. I think it's the fact that it's using the term obvious, you know, because I don't see how if we all have these arbitrary counts, whether you do really well in school and you get a job as a professor, or I have a really good technical job and I get a job as a technician, how that's an injustice. You just gotta play the cards you're dealt, it seems, because we all have these arbitrary things. So to say that I don't deserve to have a job that I'm good at just because I'm naturally inclined that way,
right?
It doesn't seem necessarily
let alone the most obvious.
Yeah, like, yeah, it's not the most obvious, yeah.
Yeah, it seems like if those factors, the arbitrary factors, aren't relevant, then any person could be interchangeable with any other person, so to speak, within that society, because then it's like, well, they're all blank slates in that way, and that's no fun.
Right, good. Yeah, well, I'll later on I have a couple of quotes. So I'm not sure we'll spend much time on them. Like Nozick, but Nozick has some. When Nozick wants to be, he can be a really, really good writer. And he has a couple of what I find sort of very sort of stirring passages about that is exactly the point that you're pushing here, which is like it seems here that Rawls wants to separate who we truly are from the point of view of justice from all of our talents and abilities that seek to be Nozick, make up who we really are. Like it's not, you can't really pull that. There's not two halves in my side, like in myself, that you can pull aside and one doesn't matter and the other. That's the one now I should be really cheering because that we are caring about that. So yeah, that's what you're saying too, right? Like if we are interchangeable in the sense that's left once we got rid of all the things that individuate us, then maybe that's not the part that we care about anymore.
I think it's kind of obvious.
Yeah?
But
Good.
I think a more important word in the reason that's obvious is the word improperly.
Right.
Because I feel like
Well, that's the cooking of the books, I think, right? So,
Yeah,
so I mean, if it's improperly, then obviously it's
because the job that you're good at, I feel like because those are your natural talents. I mean, I guess that's kind of what Rawls is what he gets to. But I feel like getting a job because those are your natural talents and you're inclined to do that isn't improper, I guess. But I can like.
So I mean, even Nozick would accept this, right? That if it was improperly influencing you, so let's say that your family happens to be the police, and now they selectively enforce contracts on your behalf, that would be improperly influencing, right? Because contracts ought to be impartially enforced.
So that's why I think it's
So that is right.
like if it was like I don't think it's an injustice that it's influenced by the factors, but I think the more important word was the improperly.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of
I mean, I see what you're saying, and you're completely right, but I think the cost here is that Rawls clearly wants his sentence to do work, right? He wants this to be an intuition that he can appeal to, so that you will be accepting his view. But if we make this improperly influenced, then everybody is going to accept this, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't work towards his view, it's going to work, it's tautological, right? It's like, well, it's obviously the most obvious injustice of the system is that it's unjust. Yeah, thank you. Right, thank you. I agree, says Nozick. So I agree, says Rawls. Have we make any progress? No. Because we plug in different ideas into justice. And here, everyone can plug their favorite idea into improperly. So it's not pushing us towards here at all. It's like spinning its wheels. So if we ignore for a moment, you're right to bring it up. That's why I said earlier, like it's a kind of a cheat for him to put in the improperly. If we ignore the improperly for a moment, that's really what that's really what Rawls wants. He wants to say that intuitively, we should be worried about these talents influencing it. That's why I think it's a fixed point, right? It's a moral judgment. It's an unmovable thing. It's not gonna give that up, whatever the theory says. That's a weird. I don't know. I find it a strange thing to say. Maybe it is obvious to some. That itself is a weird thing to say that something is obvious to some. Yeah, well, one thing that I worry about, just I'll come to you in a second. It seems to there is a version of this, not every version necessarily, but there is a version of this where we worry about how arbitrary factors might influence our distributive shares because of how other people's factors affect their distributive shares. Right? So we might not like the fact that people who are really tall and can dunk a basketball get paid a lot because we're not that tall and we can't dunk a basketball. Right? I think it's unfair if they get paid much more than us. That I think is that would be not just the most obvious injustice. That's not it. I don't think that's a good reason for injustice at all. I don't think we should think about justice in these sort of comparative terms where the justice of what I get depends on the justice of what you get, and vice versa. But that's not necessarily, not clearly what's going on, but if that's what's going on, then I'm resisting.
say is, when you use the term talents, I think that kind of narrows it down to what you're describing about, like, physical features of being tall and average. This is like, I see nothing wrong with like the best people for a job, getting a job, right. The best ones for the job. It doesn't matter if it's arbitrary how they use talents for it, but if it's like initial arbitrary features, like how we're describing like ethnicity or race or religion. I mean, yeah, and that's the problem. I think even though okay, that's the problem, just because you have some features someone else doesn't have.
Although I mean, you're right to bring that up. Like Nozick can say it's a problem, but he cannot say it's a problem that justice has something to say about without changing parts of his theory. Right? Because if it's just, I mean, if it's going to be consenting adults, then you can consent. I mean, if I'm an employer and I'm free in Nozick's system to hire whoever I want, I cannot hire a black person. I mean, crappy motivation, right? I'd be a crappy person. But if I don't want to, then you can't make me.
Yeah, but when that run along the lines of his third principle and his theories, like when you start like having like people's social injustice, then you have to look at the retributive principle.
Rectify.
Rectify. So if you don't want to hire a certain minority group, well then that's almost a certain injustice that maybe not the state needs to get involved in. But I mean, I don't think he'd really stand for that, would he?
I mean, there are things. Obviously, everybody knows that lots of things have happened in the past to lots of minorities that would count as horrible violations of Nozick's principles of justice. And the rectification principle would require that we rectify that. So, talking to Cameron about this, so slavery, the most obvious case, and one way that maybe an obvious answer to slavery would be to have reparations. And Nozick at least has hints in footnotes where he seems to think that that's a good idea. And followers of Nozick usually think that something like that is just required. That's one thing. Right? On the other hand, there's something very different, which is, you have a cake shop. Do you want to serve black people in your cake shop? If the answer is no, Nozick might point out, well, this is really expensive and a dumb thing for you to do. It comes from bad motivation. It's a character flaw, clearly. Probably in the free market, you're not going to be able to run your cake shop for very long because you lose, first of all, you lose all black customers, but you're probably also going to lose a whole bunch of white customers who don't want to come there. Right? So it's a very expensive way of running your cake shop. But then, can we do something about it? No, because that's your choice. Nozick is very clear about, we'll see this next week, but they're very clear that you can't force people to do things against their will because it's really using them for your own purposes and benefits. If you can do that, then you can use people to pay for the poor as well. Yeah, so it's not clear he really can go against this. And I think Cato brought up the right point, which is, I think Rawls is in part concerned about just innate talents, but in part also like these just general social structures militating against groups and stuff. And it's at first, we're going to be looking at the talent stuff, but it's a hard question if you can accept that the social structures would be a problem without also accepting that the talents would be a problem.
I think the thrust of Rawls's argument is more so how the social contingencies, or maybe this is just my interpretation, social contingencies can prevent people from exercise of their natural talents. Sort of like how the social contingencies can get in the way. Like, let's take a minority student in a minority district where there's 80% chance that his gym teacher is going to be the math teacher as well. He may have, or she may have natural talents and abilities, but they can't break through the institutional barriers that say that their merits matter versus someone who may be a non-minority but have access to the resources and whatnot, who may be able to get ahead without as much merit, but just offer access to and resources alone is able to get ahead in society. Since it's not always clear that you can adjust for bringing people to the same starting line, maybe distributions could be a decent answer or a decent rectification of this obvious, of this societal problem that persists. I think maybe more so that's the thrust of Rawls's argument, and not so much focus on the natural talents, but how other societal factors interfere with the exercise of natural talents.
So yeah, I think you're right in part. The positive part of what you're saying is completely right. what I don't think is right is that you're saying that Rawls is not so worried about the talents. I think he's worried about both. So he's definitely worried about what you're talking about, where somebody cannot live up to their full potential because of this environment that they're placed in or born into.
That's why I sort of see that. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, yeah, and that would be, I think that would be an obvious injustice, and if Nozick can't deal with that, then that's, I think, a problem for Nozick.
Right.
But Rawls does, he's very clear he wants to go on, because he's still talking, he usually talks about social contingencies and natural fortune side by side, as if these are really the same thing. So there's the social lottery, which is sort of the neighborhood in which you're born, and then there's the natural lottery, which is how smart you are, how tall you are, how strong you are. And so if this person in the crappy neighborhood manages to fight their way out, the fact that they're smart and manage to find their way out against the odds is not going to entitle them to more pay. So this person could be LeBron James, who came by the standard stories, grew up in a pretty crappy neighborhood. So, but then the fact that he is really talented and made it out, still, you ought to mitigate the fact that he's really talented. So you ought to take money from, like, whatever money he in the system of natural liberty in the market might be able to acquire. He has no claim to that initially. That's Rawls' position. And that matters, right? Because if we start allowing that into the original position, now the system of natural liberty has to be left in the original position. And now there are initial claims that we have over our persons and maybe over our possessions that aren't just up for distributive justice anymore.
So then Rawls would have to do a stronger argument to separate self-ownership from ownership of holdings.
Yes, well, yeah, exactly. So ultimately the question that we're going to look at this part of term is, if we think of ourselves as owning ourselves, as Nozick clearly does, can you draw a distinction? Like, is there a separation between yourself and the external parts that you own? And it seems that Nozick is required to say, yeah, there is a hard line that those are really two separate things. Nozick says, no, because you create, like, you've worked for it and so on, right?
You mean Rawls says there's a clear distinction?
Rawls says there's a clear, there's yourself, although it's not clear he's even said, well, actually, we should take that back. We'll look later at G.A. Cohen, who was a self-professed Marxist in the last two classes of term, and he thought there was a clear distinction. Rawls maybe did not think there was a clear distinction, because he does say, at least in the first edition of A Theory of Justice, he says that our natural talents are a collective asset. So he thinks everything is shared, including your person. So it's all on the table in the original position.
He had to take that back.
He did, yeah, but it's not clear that by just not saying it anymore, it's out of the theory. Right? So maybe he thinks that external, like money and objects and so on, is subject to distribution in the original position, but also your natural talents are subject to being allocated by the community. Of course, we know Nozick doesn't like this, because Nozick says, well, okay, well then we should just put unemployed people to work for the poor. Why don't we do that? Right? Maybe that's a way of using their talents. But anyway, then Nozick thinks, well, if you believe that you own your talents, you also believe that you own your stuff, that you produce with your talents.
Right.
And so
Would I be
Cohen ultimately says, no, you just two are very different.
Would I be going too far if I say that Rawls probably thinks that we can respect individuality and people's dignity without necessarily buying into Nozick's idea of self-ownership?
Yes, that's exactly right. Yeah. And so Nozick goes after him for that. Nozick said, that's the point that Tyler was raising too. So look, if we have to assume that what matters from the point of justice is the things that he says are not morally arbitrary, which is, well, your gender, it's your skin color, it's your religion, it's your culture, it's your family, it's your neighborhood, it's your IQ, these things are all supposed to be behind the veil. They don't matter, right? What do we have left exactly? and then Nozick says, if we have a theory of justice that honors the part that we have left, should we be happy about that? Is that the thing that we care about, or do we care about all the stuff that we've thrown out? Right? And if we care about all the stuff that we've thrown out, then theory of justice should take that stuff seriously. But of course, if we take that seriously, now that everything is on the table, now the whole issue that you're raising starts.
Sorry, I don't know that you're looking at this.
I do. This is slide 1. But
My bad.
I think we're doing. I mean, I'm having a blast. I guess so.
I guess sort of.
It's good to be the boss. Didn't even mean it that way.
Could you sort of divide, I know you talked a little bit about like the natural talents and stuff, and I know that Rawls wants to put like the talent, not really, like you said, not really talents, but he wants to put a lot of things under the veil of ignorance, and then whatever's left, that's what it's based on.
Yeah.
But I feel like you can't separate the two really, just because it seems like a lot of the talents are so interconnected with the like the neighborhood you grow up in, the family. Like if your parents are really good at English, then you're probably gonna have like a more leaning towards being better at English than other subjects. So it just seems interesting to like the concept of trying to divide up the talents and whatever talents are not. Then, I don't know if this is the
Yeah.
right way to look at it, but
Well, actually, it's a good way of going to my second slide, but you'll see that one of the reasons why Rawls wants to push so much out of the original position, so much behind it is precisely because he thinks, well, if your neighborhood is supposed to be not influencing how you end up, because that, well, why? Well, because that wasn't chosen or something, you didn't do anything to get there, to deserve it. Well, okay, that's true for your neighborhood, but that's also true for your IQ, right? And then he thinks, well, but it's also true for the stuff that you're interested in or that motivates you, like maybe you're a good student. Well, that Rawls will say, we'll see in a second, but he says, well, that's partially true because you've grown up in this family that rewarded, being a good student. They didn't tell you to be lazy or something. So, well, he didn't do anything to grow up in that environment, and so he says, well, all these things are just really unchosen, so all of them go. Right? If the neighborhood goes, then your smart goes, then your interested goes, then you're motivated and hardworking. All these things are just arbitrary. Well, yeah, good. That's Tyler's worry, right?
There goes the neighborhood.
Yeah. Punning all over the place. All right. So here's a way of putting it. Like, suppose you say this, replacing LeBron James' He said so Stephen Curry deserves to be paid millions of dollars because he's amazingly talented. He's amazingly talented basketball player. Let's say that you'd say that, right? Because that's the reason, right? Because he's talented. Rawls said no, right? That's a mistake. It's not a good way of thinking about justice. Because our talents are undeserved, arbitrary from all point of view, their material effects, how much money you make, should be canceled out. So that's you've seen the quotes already. Maybe they say, well, I didn't mean it that way. Right? Say, well, it's not because he's talented. They say, well, it's not because he's talented that he deserves to be paid, but because he worked really hard, or maybe better, he worked really hard using his talents. Right? Like he worked really hard at developing his talents and then putting them to good use. He could have been drinking alcohol all the time and like going out and whatever. No, he didn't do that. He went to the gym all day, every day, right? And so that's why he deserves to be paid. And then, so this is the point that you're raising. Rawls says, no, even the willingness to make an effort and try, and so to be deserving in the ordinary sense, is itself dependent upon happy family and social circumstances, meaning arbitrary to be corrected. The effort one is willing to make is influenced by natural abilities and skills, and the alternatives open to use. So that all is one package of unchosen stuff. And that's arbitrary and therefore to be nullified, right? Like you're mitigated. Justice is supposed to undo this. So yeah, that's Rawls really wants to go very far on this. Let's do Rawlsians in general. So here's instead so a just scheme gives people his due, logically. So it allots to each what they're entitled to as defined by the scheme itself. This is the point of deservingness and entitlement only happens once we've set up the principles. Principle of justice for institutions and individuals established that doing this is fair. So you can deserve something, but only once the rules are set up. All right. That's the view. By the way, I think there is something odd. I think this anyone should acknowledge.
There's something weird about saying that you deserve your talents. That Stephen Curry deserved to be a great shooter of all time. People say. It's hard to think anyone can be better at shooting than what people. But that's not really the question, maybe, right? So the question that Nozick wants to raise is, well, but must we deserve our talents in order to deserve being paid for it, right? For using them. And so that's the one that Nozick wants to refuse. Right? Nozick wants to say, even if you think that being talented is arbitrary or random, that doesn't mean that you're not, that if you use your talents correctly, you work hard for it, you don't deserve to be rewarded for them. So here's one way you might say it. There's a difference between saying two things. One saying, it's not true that Curry deserves all that money just because he's talented. That would be a negative argument. But here's another thing that you might say, it's true that Curry deserves not to have all that money because he's talented. That's where's the negation, right? You might deny the thesis that Curry deserves it because he's talented, or you might assert or affirm the thesis that Curry does not deserve it, that it deserves to be taken away from him. And it seems that Rawls is going in for this one, right? This is you have to nullify, you have to mitigate it. It's true, Rawls says, that Curry deserves not to have all that money because he's talented. So this would just be saying, just because he's talented doesn't give him a deserved claim to money. Here it is saying, just because he's talented means he deserves not to have that money. You have to undo it. That seems to be what Rawls is saying. Something is morally arbitrary from the point of view of justice, we ought to mitigate and deny it. Up until the point where you work hard, right? It's a really bizarre view in some ways. It's like if you work hard, then that has to be undone. I wonder about do we work hard under that society? So, by the way, keep in mind, Nozick is not saying that people should get what they deserve. Right? Because remember, being paid what you deserve is a pattern. He actually explicitly says getting people what they deserve is a pattern theory. In his society, all patterns get blown up, including the deserving. But he does think that Nozick going after deserve and talents is part of an argument that he ought to resist, because it's part of this argument where we split what we own, our stuff, from our individual persons, our self-ownership. That's the thing that he wants to go against. Look at us flying through these slides. So here's the first premise, right? The one that we talked about. So if a person doesn't deserve a feature F, then F should not determine his position in society. That should be nullified. Two objections that Nozick offers, just so that you keep track of what's going on. One is that it actually is inconsistent with the difference principle. Remember, the difference principle allows inequalities because it will make people work harder. But working hard is supposed to be nullified, says Rawls. But the difference principle allows reward for them. So now the difference principle turns out to be unjust. That's a problem. So premise one seems to be inconsistent. So if we're going for something like this, we need to gerrymander it around the difference principle and towards innate talent or innate self-ownership. Here's another one. I asked you to think about this for the reading questions. Famous phrase by Nozick. Says it's not true, he thinks, that a person earns Y, this amount of money, right? Only if he's earned or otherwise deserves what he used, including his natural assets, in the process of earning Y. So this is about Curry, right? Curry does not deserve his talents, but, says Nozick, it's not true that a person, that Curry earns his money in a morally relevant sense, only if he's actually earned or deserves whatever he used, his talents, in order to get to that money. And that seems to be what Rawls is assuming, right? Rawls thinks, no, wait, your talents, you didn't do anything to get those, so we need to nullify that. And as your hard work, well, that's partially your family and your social circumstances too, so we need to nullify that. And the idea seems to be, unless you've earned or deserved everything that goes into earning or deserving that money, you have no claim. And that's what Nozick is saying, that can't be right. Because if that's right, then some of the things he uses Curry or you or me, right? You just may have, not illegitimately. Right? It's not, you didn't violate anyone's rights, you didn't steal anyone's rights, because that was possible. You can coerce people to let you be the star as fast as the best. It needn't be that the foundations underlying the cert and themselves deserve all the way down. He thinks, well, look, at some point you got to start, right? When do you start deserving things? Well, it can't just be all the way down, you have to deserve everything, because nothing will be left. At some point, there are just circumstances, so it's just you. And then you can't start with deserve at that point, and you can't start with deserve at all. Those are things that's just not an acceptable view. So notice, right, this is an internal critique, saying, look, well, you have your difference principle, but difference principle actually violates this idea, this principle, this premise one. The second is not internal, but this is an implausible idea, right? Because the reasons that Rawls gives for this is that the stuff, feature F, right, you don't deserve it because social contingencies or not choice or whatever, right? Something external to you influenced it. And those are things, well, it cannot just be that as soon as there is any sort of influence from outside of you that therefore you have no claim on it anymore. That would require you deserve things all the way down, and you're never going to get to a point where deserve starts. All right, so here's two implications. Right? If Nozick is right, then P can deserve something, that should have been Y, I guess. Even if P does not deserve everything that went into getting that. Right? And second, he's talking about earning more than deserving, so entitlements. Right? He says, like, look, even if you don't deserve your talents, they're still yours. Right? They'd be better. Like, who else would they be? Of course, we know in the original, Rawls says everybody's. Nozick, that's not an option. They're yours. They're yours more than mine. Nozick thinks, if you're going to go to your job tonight, for example, this weekend, who has a say over the money that you make? You more than me. Not everybody. Right. Suddenly we sped up. Right. Anyone any thoughts or questions about what we've done so far? All right. So here are the quotes that I was talking about. These aren't the more, I like these and put them out because I think this is really where you get the heart of the objection that Nozick is raising. Really quickly, because I like it. This is my party after all. This line of argument, Rawls' line of argument, can succeed in blocking the introduction of a person's autonomous choices and actions and the results only by attributing everything noteworthy to certain sorts of external factors. So here it goes. So denigrating a person's autonomy and prime responsibility for his actions is a risky line for a theory that otherwise wishes to address the dignity and self-respect of autonomous beings. Rawls, you all about dignity and self-respect and responsibility and autonomy and so on. But it's risky for you to then start saying that everything that makes up who you are has got nothing to do with you. It's all external, it's what's left. One doubts that the unexalted picture of human beings, Rawls' theory presupposes, and rests upon can be made to fit together with the view of human dignities designed to lead to and embody. That's right. I think it's a very beautiful reading statement. That's kind of what I think what ultimately Nozick is about. Is you can't separate too much what we make or what we produce from who we are. Because if you do that, you have to start abstracting away from who we are, all the things that go into what we make or what we produce. And that's getting too close to the core.
So does he mean literally like what you make? It's like if you're a factory worker and you produce like certain goods, like since you were going to produce that good, like that's literally yours, or just the things that like, okay, so by working in that factory you produce that good, but you see you got paid away and you bought a house, so the house is yours. Is that one of the ones, or?
Well, in principle, both, right? So it's a great point you're raising. So Cohen, we won't read this part by Cohen, but it's in the same book of the part that we read. Cohen has a paper, the book he wrote is called Self-Ownership, World Ownership, and Equality. And it's Cohen's response to Nozick. And he has a chapter on it, he says, like, why, when Nozick came out, most Rawlsians were like, nah, sort of that was the reaction, roughly. They wrote a couple of the most notable ones, wrote some very dismissive things, and then they just moved on as if it never happened. Cohen was a pretty full-fledged Marxist. Cohen was greatly exercised by it. And so he has a chapter in the book where basically he talks about why do Rawlsians not care, and why do we Marxists care. So the social democrat, like sort of Rawlsian, doesn't care, but the Marxist cares. And the Marxist cares exactly for the reason you just brought up, which is the whole Marxian theory, we'll get to this in a couple of weeks, but the whole Marxian theory of exploitation rests on the Nozickian picture, which is the laborer goes into the factory and has their labor extracted without full compensation. That's exploitation in Marx. You, the laborer, you go in, you deliver a certain amount of value at the working line, and like say $10 worth, and then you go home, not with $10, but with $8 in wages, and there's $2. That's the capitalist profit. And that's wrong, says the Marxist, because you own the $10 worth because it's your labor. But if you don't say you own it, then there's no wrongness left. So Cohen thinks, oh crap, right? Like, so I'd like this stuff about the laborer owning his own work, right? But of course, if I take this all away like Nozick does, now I'm not a Marxist, I'm a full-fledged, the hardest of the poorest of the capitalists. Right? So hence the whole book gets written about how you can get out of this. But yeah, so in Nozick, of course, he doesn't think that's true because what he thinks is a voluntary agreement between the laborer and the capitalist is to exchange value for value, work for money. He has a section in the book, by the way, on the Marxian theory of exploitation. It's not. There's other reasons why it fails. But yeah, so he thinks, they agreed to give it up, but in principle, before they gave it up, yeah, that labor was the laborer's possession. And of course, then if you make money by selling your labor to your employer, then you can take that money and buy a house. That's by a detour, right? There's a middleman, which is the employer who gave you money to buy the house. But now if I start taxing your house, I'm really taxing the money which was the labor which was yours. So that's, yeah, these are all of a piece. So hence the different views, right? So Nozick says you own yourself and therefore you own everything that you use yourself to produce, all the money you make. Cohen thinks, I do like the idea of people owning themselves and having a claim to their labor, but I don't like the idea of self-ownership where that means nobody can ever require you to help them. So he's going to try and cut that off, cut that somewhere. Get that. Cohen actually in the end denies self-ownership, denies that you actually are self-owner. And then we have Rawls who says, well, it's all for grabs. What Nozick is saying here is everything being up for grabs is a pretty, he thinks, it's a risky line because you don't really end up with a view of each person that matters anymore. So here's the one, right? It's like, in Rawls' view, the two principles of justice rule out even the tendency to regard men as means to another's welfare. So they rule out, I guess, that also the actual using of people as means to another, but even the tendency. Only if one presses very hard on the distinction between men and their talents, assets, abilities, and special traits. So only if we start really making a very strong analytical distinction between who we are and our talents and our characteristics. Because whether any coherent conception of a person remains when the distinction is so pressed is an open question. Why we, thick with particular traits, should be cheered that only our thus purified selves are within us. Are not regarded as means to others is also just that's Tyler's point. Like, why should we care that the theory of justice takes this purified, that's obviously sarcastic, this purified self where nothing that we care about in our lives is on the table anymore. That's what the theory takes seriously. Like, why should we be cheered about that? He's like, I don't know, I don't see it anymore. These are not deductive arguments, but they are things that I think they put Nozick's argument in its most persuasive light, whether they survive or not. Of course, we have the same your worry starts appearing now again. If you think with Nozick, maybe the talents really are yours. Maybe that means that you can have a claim on what talents produce. That means we're allowing certain things that are unchosen or external to you to influence the distribution of money and so on. And if we're doing that, can we still resist neighborhoods, race, ethnicity, and so on, being unjust ways of influencing how much money we get? So we're by no means out of the woods if you accept this. But this is at least Nozick's way of saying Rawls's position won't do. Yeah, go for it. Sorry.
I think it was 2 slides back when it says, if Nozick is right, then a person can deserve X even if the person didn't go into everything that gave them the right to X. Does that mean like a person inherits a large sum of money that his or her parents made, and that is therefore his or her withdrawals, think that's unjust or just?
I'm positive that Rawls would think that's unjust.
Okay.
Because those are just social contingencies that give you a head start. So Rawlsians in general, 100% inheritance tax, that's sort of the least contentious of them, right?
And then those are the thing like
That's a normal transfer, right? That's an exchange between consenting adults. So yeah, that's what we're doing when we tax. Let's say your parents leave you some X amount of money, and if the government taxes it at 50% or whatever, how much they tax it, they're taking that much of your parents' labor. Your parents left that money with the purpose of benefiting you. That's what they worked for. And this is Nozick speaking, right? This is what they worked for. And so now when the government comes and takes that, they're telling your parents after the fact, still, that's not what you worked for. And it's going to end. Whatever. What's the latest thing? There's lots of stuff. That stuff, we're going to use it for that. And Nozick thinks, well, no, your parents were free and self-owning individuals, and they get to decide what their work and their labor and their efforts go towards. You can't do that. Head starts be damned. So that happens. So people have a head start. So what?
How would a modern day Rawlsian address the all the way down statement that Nozick said? Like a more moderate Rawlsian that doesn't want to go full on G.A. Cohen.
Well, Cohen was not a Rawlsian. Cohen was a
Marxist.
fierce critic of. Yeah, he thought that Rawls was sort of a softie, sold out to these, sold out to the capitalist demon society. Cohen wanted full-fledged equality. So, yeah, he thinks there's a hypocrisy built right in the heart of this. You can't allow inequality and be an egalitarian at the same time.
Oh, wow.
Now he thinks you might want to trade off equality for other values, which is like efficiency, but then we're just sort of selling a little bit of justice for comfort. And he thinks, well, modern life is sort of like that. He thinks in societies like ours, we accept the injustice of inequality because it pays.
Oh my God, what did he have in mind? And that's a normative statement for
He
me.
marked himself as a couple. He was a very self-deprecating
Oh, okay.
character, but I saw him give a talk where he said, if the Marxist revolution breaks out, and lots of stuff will change, but my view from my office in All Souls College in Oxford won't, right? He realized he was living a very privileged life. Anyway, it's not clear what he had in mind. I mean, he didn't have in mind what we had. And I think that in a morally pure society, people would be motivated automatically to work just as hard as they work now. And then there are certain issues about how do we know where our efforts are most efficiently placed, which the market helps us, the price system helps us allocate that, right? Like prices are high where things are scarce, and so that tells you that if you want to make money, that you use your talents where things are scarce, so where they're most useful. Cohen recognized this, but he thought this was sort of a technical problem. So maybe with powerful enough computers, we can sort of generate all the data and then figure out something that gets close enough. That's how we do it. So now, it might not work, right? But that's just because people are crappy. They're not motivated the right way. So what it means to say that people are crappy means to say that they're not fully just, right? So yeah, if the best we can do is a society like ours, then we are trading off justice because we are crappy, right? For well-being, happiness, comfort.
So how would the modern day Rawlsian address the all the way down, the desert thing?
Yeah, I got to that second. So there's several. Most of the Rawlsians I've met, which is a lot. For better or worse, just put their foot down on it. Say, this is the Rawlsian view, I'll go with it. And so they bite the bullet, I guess.
Right.
Sometimes they get a little shifty. Like I remember a conversation in grad school with a died in the wool Rawlsian put on, like I said, this seems to be a problem too. He says, well, I didn't really mean that, and that wasn't good enough, but yeah. Then what? Others, there's someone at Rice University called George Scher, who wrote a whole book on desert. Starts off by criticizing Rawls, and then comes up with a conception of desert, but still, so he thinks that that desert is a coherent concept, but not something that the market necessarily rewards. And so, in a just society, you have to undo still some of the inequalities that the market creates, in part because of desert, but then desert is not the only principle of justice. There's a whole bunch of principles of justice, and so you end up with, on the whole, much more equality than we have under a Nozick system. But
What did you say the person's name was?
S-H-E-R, sure. The book is I think it's 1987. Put on my Terry knows these things. Sorry?
Not sure about the year.
Yeah. Somehow I can often remember a
You have to
publication
be dead
year.
before I'm sure about the years.
Or a baseball player. You know about all this. Yeah.
Thanks.
Huh. Time flies. So, all right. Any questions? No? Hey, I have a question, which is very different from this. The last time we had a pop quiz, did you guys see the reading questions beforehand?
I didn't.
No. That's the one time, right? That's
Yeah, I think that.
yeah, okay, I'm going to correct that. I thought I was going over it this weekend in the announcements, and I saw something must have gone wrong with me posting them. So I'll wipe that one. Or if you want to keep your grade, you can keep your grade. But
No.
I'll make up for it because that wasn't you were supposed to have access to the reading questions before, so I'll make up for it.
Okay.
And I'll let you know. See you next time.
That wasn't very specific.
Yeah.
The very last